You're listening to the Bear in Mind podcast, episode number 54.
A podcast uncovering identity, color, and love, where driving yourself crazy is totally sane and curable. Now your host, T. Bias.
Is there something you've always wanted that you're kind of embarrassed to admit it out loud, even to yourself? It kind of stays in your head like a dream, and then you never go further with it. You're just like, oh, that's kind of out of reach, so I'm not even going to bother to even let yourself think about it. And a lot of times, some of my dreams have been scary, so I don't look at it or even go past, like, what would that mean or what would I need to do? And so it stays kind of in this fog. I think I've shied away from telling people my goals because they seem embarrassing, because either they seem totally out of reach. And there's kind of another reason. It's starting and stopping a goal. And once I've communicated what I want to achieve to somebody and I haven't achieved it in what I would consider the time frame, either I have a time frame in my mind or what I would guess society thinks is a reasonable amount of time, I'm then kind of embarrassed. So, I mean, I've kind of had this with myself, but also I know of friends where you have a goal to lose weight and you lose weight and then you gain it back, you lose weight and then you gain it back. And so even saying it out loud to yourself, let alone saying it to another person, almost becomes a little bit embarrassing. Like, oh, I'm not even going to bother. And then you just kind of dismiss it. And that has happened to me with a goal I have. And I am embarrassed to even kind of set it out and write it out, like write out what I want to achieve in this certain amount of time frame, because I am kind of embarrassed when I think about how long I've been spending on learning French. And I've started and stopped so many times, more than you can count. And it's been, I think, something, if I do the math right, for 10 years. Starting and stop. And so now it's kind of like I don't really communicate it. I mean, there's probably people that I know quite well that know that I'm busy with French because they'll see me in my daily life and they'll know I have a French lesson or something like that. But in general, I feel sort of embarrassed, kind of like with the yo-yo dieting. So if you're kind of at a point with something that you truly want and it hasn't progressed, or you haven't achieved it yet, and it just kind of seems to be going on and on and on. And oftentimes we can get quite down on ourselves and look at all the stuff that's gone wrong because we haven't achieved it, and look at all of the failures and things along the way. There is something to just kind of think about, is that you haven't quit yet. And you haven't quit, and you're still kind of chugging along and trying to get what you want. And I talked about that in a few episodes ago about quitting, is that quitting is really, it's not necessarily maybe even the starting and stopping or things like that. It's when you mentally kind of like, okay, I'm not even going to do this anymore. And then you chalk it up to, well, the failures that you've had, or you put it on the amount of time, oh, this is taking too long, this is not worth my time anymore. And so you kind of have a really good reason. And even though you might have a really good reason also for wanting it, you decide that I have a really good reason for quitting. And what I mentioned before in the episode is that you can continue even though, or you take ownership for your quitting, you can continue, you know that you can continue. And you're stopping anyway. You know that you can go on. So that's something to be aware of, is that you haven't quit. And that's pretty amazing. And we kind of all know the cliches is that if you decide to quit, And the way to kind of tell that you're not, that you haven't mentally kind of quit, is that you're still thinking about that thing that you want. And I'm still thinking about speaking French fluently. So maybe you have stopped taking action, like I've stopped, before I stopped studying or stopped taking classes or whatever. But if you still kind of have this kind of mental relationship with that thing that you want, you haven't let it go. And it could be because you haven't taken ownership for the quitting, but it also could be that you still want it bad enough, that you have really good reasons for wanting that thing that you want. If it's like losing weight, it's your reason is that you want to be healthier, more active, and that's still weighing on your mind. So you haven't mentally quit. And that's a great thing. So I came back to this goal of learning French that I had mentally been obsessing over for quite some time. And so then the question became how to start again, even though the goal is kind of embarrassing to have been doing it for so long, or you've had success and then failure, success and failure, etc. And so I recently learned that whenever you set a goal, it doesn't have to be this big process. It needs to be one sentence, and it needs to be measurable with time. There is this thing that you may have heard about, like SMART goals and everything like that. And I really think that's great, maybe for a business or something. But when it comes to your own life and your goals, it can be really simple just to state the measurement. So, I mean, if you're losing weight, the measurement could be the number of kilos or pounds that you're going to lose. And for French, it's going to be, I will, by episode 80, by the way, so I've just set my goal. So it's going to be at episode 80 that I will have achieved a B2 level, which is a European framework for languages, a B2 level of French, which will be evaluated by my professor. And so that's it. I mean, it's really just taking that one sentence saying, okay, how will I know I've achieved it? And the time. And once we do that, it can kind of feel kind of scary to do it that way, because when we are trying to restart back at something, maybe we haven't done it in the beginning, because I know that I really didn't write down on a piece of paper. I have it actually written in my agenda exactly what the goal is, and we keep it in our head, and it kind of stays stuck in our head. And then I think we get into these mental kind of obsession with the goal, and once it's out on paper, I mean, it becomes usually scarier. I also noticed that I had a little bit of relief of just writing out exactly what I wanted. So I keep it handy. Like I said, it's in my agenda. And one of the great things about starting and restopping a goal, and it is really a really amazing thing to have gone through it and still continue. And one of the best things you can do is to understand what happened. And we all know that we can learn from failure. But if you've been on a goal for quite some time, where to start from a learning? Because sometimes learn from your failure. Like, what am I supposed to learn? And one of the things that I think is important to getting something that you want is to understand why you want it. So when I look back at when I started to learn, and I couldn't speak one word. I started to learn that because of my job. I got a job, and all of a sudden the manager's like, we're going to have to speak French. And the meetings were in French. And that was not told to me during the interview. I was like, okay. And so I started taking evening classes, and I was really afraid that I wasn't going to keep my job. And my reason was out of fear. If you really think about it, I'm afraid I'm going to lose my job. And that was fueling that first kind of, when I was taking lessons, that first attempt at learning French. And I can see the starting and stopping kind of being from this place of, I'm afraid something's going to happen, or afraid I won't get another job or something like that. There was always kind of this fear behind why I was doing something. And those things, I mean, I think that they can be there. for if you're trying to lose weight, I'm going to keep going back to the example, but sometimes someone might fear that their health is they're becoming more and more unhealthy. And one of the things that I think you can do is allow that fear to be there, but also kind of just maybe think about what it is that you actually want as opposed to what you don't want. So I didn't want to lose my job, but what did I want? And as soon as I asked the question in a different way, that I don't want to lose my job, I wanted more opportunity in the market. And today, my desire to learn French is completely different. It has slightly to do with work, but also it's because I want to see what I'm capable of. And I want to see if I'm capable of speaking this language that I've been working on for 10 years. I want to see if I'm capable of speaking it. And that's kind of the main why, even though there might be some other whys and other fears that come up, and they're all true to you. But what is really going to kind of get you to that finish line is going to be the overarching kind of reason why you're doing it. And coming from a place of always doing it from fear. And I think we've all kind of heard that, coming from a place of fear and things like that. But that could be one of the reasons why you start and stop. And why, you have some success and then you go back and things like that, is because that kind of energy that's coming from fear can really kind of burn you out and have you feel exhausted. And I know I was exhausted when I was trying to learn French because I was fearful of losing my job. And so I have shared with you my embarrassing goal, and I will check back with you in episode 80 and also next week.
Thanks for listening. Listen for a new episode next Tuesday by subscribing on your favorite podcast platform. Bye for now.